Ever feel overlooked despite your expertise? What if the secret to instant authority isn't what you say, but how you stand and move? This audiobook reveals subtle, neuroscience-backed body language shifts, easy to master yet profoundly effective, so you can finally command respect, break through career plateaus, and move confidently into every interaction. Ready? Let's unlock silent persuasion. Chapter 1: Core Posture. Have you ever walked into a room and felt an instant, unspoken judgment lock onto you? Before a single word is exchanged, an invisible, primal appraisal has already set your social ranking. That's because your posture, not your words, delivers your first and most lasting impression. Silent persuasion begins here, in the subtle yet powerful language of your body. Imagine this. The moment you step into a boardroom, your spinal alignment and the slight elevation of your chin speak volumes, louder than your credentials or your carefully prepared talking points. Within the first 3 seconds, your audience has unconsciously decoded your status. You might think you're evaluated based on intelligence or experience, but the hardwired truth is more primal. Posture precedes perception. If your spine is compressed, your shoulders rounded, and your chin dropped, you've silently surrendered authority before even taking a breath. Why does posture hold such commanding influence? It's simple neuroscience. Your brain operates on a body-first shortcut, relying on embodied cognition. Long before language evolved, humans used posture to establish hierarchy: who led, who followed, who wielded power, and who submitted. This primitive mechanism still controls our immediate judgments today. The way you hold yourself directly adjusts your internal chemistry. Cortisol dips and testosterone rises when your posture expands, priming your body for confidence and control. Yet, confusion persists about posture versus presence. Many mistakenly believe presence is solely charisma, an intangible aura, but presence is actually anchored in your physical alignment. Without correct spinal positioning, your presence evaporates into a myth. It's your spine structure that dictates how others instinctively categorize your authority: high, neutral, or low. This spectrum, known as the dominance posture curve, moves from compressed and submissive to expansive and authoritative. Recognizing your habitual posture is the first critical step toward leveraging silent persuasion. Spotting your baseline posture leak is straightforward. Glance in a mirror and notice your default alignment. Most people unknowingly slump into a neutral or collapsed position, particularly under stress. Try this quick audit. Check your reflection at 3 key moments throughout your day: morning, midday, and evening. Notice your sternum. Is it exposed confidently or hidden inward? Observe your shoulders, squared and open or subtly slumped forward. Adjusting your alignment doesn't require drastic changes. Instead, implement micro adjustments. Imagine lifting your sternum upward by just 1 centimeter, nudging your shoulders subtly back and down. This minor tweak instantly shifts your posture from hesitant to commanding, unlocking a cascade of powerful internal reactions. Your body, in turn, sends signals of composure, decisiveness, and leadership, silently but unmistakably. Next, consider torso torque, the angle at which your chest faces others. A common trap is angling your torso away from confrontation. Instinctively, this signals avoidance or disinterest. On the other hand, squaring your chest directly toward your audience projects openness, sincerity, and control of resources, critical nonverbal cues that reinforce your status. But beware the 45-degree trap. Overly direct postures can read as confrontational rather than candid. Find the subtle midpoint where confidence and approachability intersect. Sitting posture demands equal attention. Many forfeit authority the moment they take a seat, allowing their spine to collapse into a casual slump. Maintain your seated posture by slightly engaging your core and positioning your torso upright, rotating from the hips rather than the waist. Even seated, this subtle torque preserves your authority, signaling continuous engagement and control. Now, pivot to head angles, perhaps the most nuanced lever in your silent persuasion toolkit. The chin lift threshold is a delicate boundary. A slight upward tilt, about 5 to 8 degrees, conveys confidence, but raise it even a fraction too high, and your posture slides into arrogance. Conversely, avoid cute lateral head tilts. While endearing socially, they subconsciously undermine professional authority. Practicing a 2-minute wall exercise, aligning your spine and gently pressing your head back can reset your natural head positioning, eliminating ingrained habits of self-diminishment. Ultimately, the goal is integrating these posture elements into a seamless, subconscious routine, a set-then-forget approach anchored by mindful breathing. When you stabilize your breath deep in your diaphragm, your body automatically aligns correctly, reinforcing your silent authority consistently and effortlessly. But remember, posture doesn't operate in isolation. It's just one lever among many. As you progress, you'll stack posture with spatial command, authority gaze, and prime gestures, multiplying your nonverbal impact exponentially. Reflect for a moment. Where do you find your posture collapsing most often? Is it when entering high-stakes meetings, or perhaps during casual interactions? Identifying these weak points is the first move toward permanent transformation. Soon, these core posture adjustments will be as intuitive as breathing, silently enhancing every interaction you have. Yet, posture is just the beginning. While you've started mastering how to broadcast authority instantly, there's a subtler layer waiting beneath your feet, one that governs not just how you stand, but how you command the space around you. It's time to step deeper into silent persuasion and uncover the invisible dynamics of spatial command. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Spatial Command. Why do some people seem to own every room they enter, while others fade into the background despite having perfect posture? The secret lies not in how they stand, but in how they claim the invisible territory around them. Space isn't just emptiness, it's a silent language of power, and those who master it control conversations before they even begin. Picture this. You walk into a conference room, and without saying a word, everyone instinctively knows you're in charge. It's not magic, it's spatial command. The way you occupy territory, the distances you maintain, and even where you choose to position yourself sends unmistakable signals about your status and intent. While others stumble through awkward positioning, you'll navigate space like a chess grandmaster, claiming authority through invisible moves. The psychology behind spatial command runs deeper than most realize. Humans are territorial creatures, hardwired to read space as a resource indicator. When you control more territory, or control it more confidently, your brain and others' brains automatically categorize you as higher status. This isn't conscious, it's primal. The person who commands space commands attention, respect, and ultimately, influence. But here's where most people go wrong. They think bigger is always better. They spread out aggressively, invade personal space, or claim the biggest chair. This crude approach backfires spectacularly, triggering defensive reactions instead of respect. True spatial command is far more sophisticated. It's about strategic positioning, not territorial aggression. Consider your typical meeting room entrance. Most people shuffle in, grab the nearest available seat, and hope for the best. They've just surrendered their first and most powerful opportunity to establish authority. Instead, there's a technique called the gatekeeper stance that transforms any doorway into an authority frame. When you pause briefly at the threshold, not blocking traffic, but claiming that transitional space for just a moment, you unconsciously signal that you control access to the room. Everyone notices, even if they can't articulate why. The timing of this pause is crucial. Too short, and it reads as hesitation. Too long, and you become an obstacle. The sweet spot is roughly 2 to 3 seconds, enough time for your presence to register, but brief enough to maintain momentum. During this pause, your eyes should sweep the room, taking inventory of the space and its occupants. This isn't a nervous glance. It's a confident assessment that says you're evaluating the territory before claiming your position within it. Once inside, your chair choice becomes your next silent declaration. The head of the table isn't always the power position. Sometimes it's too obvious, even confrontational. Instead, look for what spatial theorists call command positions. Seats that offer clear sight lines to the door, allow you to see all participants, and provide easy exit routes. These positions give you tactical advantages while appearing naturally chosen. But spatial command extends beyond seating. Notice how you arrange the objects around you, your laptop, notebook, phone, or coffee cup. These items become boundary markers defining your micro-territory. Spreading them strategically creates what's known as table spread, subtly claiming more space than your physical body occupies. However, cluttered spreading signals chaos, not control. The key is purposeful placement that expands your presence without appearing disorganized. There's another layer to spatial mastery that most people completely miss: negative space. The emptiness around your body speaks as loudly as your posture. When you maintain clear space around your elbows and avoid cramping yourself into tight quarters, you project importance. Important people have room to breathe, space to gesture, territory that others instinctively respect. This air around the elbows principle might seem trivial, but it's one of the most powerful silent signals you can send. Distance management requires even more finesse. There's a concept called the proxemic staircase, 4 distinct zones that govern how closely you can approach others without triggering discomfort or resistance. Public distance keeps you safely in presentation mode. Social distance allows for professional interaction. Personal distance suggests familiarity and trust. Intimate distance is reserved for close relationships and should be approached with extreme caution in professional settings. The art lies in sliding down this staircase gradually, reading microsignals to gauge when you can move closer without overstepping boundaries. High-status individuals naturally shrink distance as conversations deepen, but they do it incrementally, testing each step. Move too fast, and you trigger defensive reactions. Move too slowly, and you miss opportunities to build connection and influence. Sometimes, tactical retreat becomes necessary. When someone invades your space aggressively, or when group dynamics shift unexpectedly, knowing how to reset spatial relationships preserves your authority. This isn't about backing down, it's about strategic repositioning that maintains your command while diffusing tension. Room scanning becomes your ongoing spatial intelligence operation. Continuously monitor how space is being used, where power centers are forming, and when territorial boundaries shift. Anchor points, key positions that offer maximum influence, change as meetings evolve. The person who recognizes and adapts to these shifts maintains spatial command throughout the interaction. Reflect on your own spatial habits. Where does the room make you feel small? Is it certain seating arrangements, crowded environments, or specific types of spaces? Identifying these patterns helps you develop countermeasures, ensuring that physical environments enhance rather than undermine your authority. Mastering spatial command transforms you from someone who simply occupies space into someone who owns it. But even perfect positioning means nothing if your eyes can't hold the room's attention. The next frontier of silent persuasion lies in something far more intimate and immediate, something that happens in the space between blinks, where true authority is born and lost in microseconds. Chapter 3: Authority Gaze. There's a moment in every high-stakes interaction when the room goes silent and all eyes turn to see who will look away first. In that instant, hierarchies shift, power transfers, and authority is either claimed or surrendered. Your eyes don't just see, they command, direct, and control the invisible currents of influence flowing through every conversation. Most people treat eye contact like a binary switch. Either you make it or you don't. But true authority gaze operates on a completely different level, a sophisticated system of visual cues that can lock an entire room's attention, guide group dynamics, and broadcast unshakable composure without saying a single word. The difference between confident eye contact and authority gaze is like the difference between holding a flashlight and wielding a laser. Why do eyes wield such disproportionate power over human interaction? The answer lies deep in our evolutionary wiring. Long before language developed, our ancestors used gaze patterns to establish dominance hierarchies and coordinate group behavior. The individual who could hold steady eye contact while others looked away naturally became the leader. This primal programming still governs our reactions today. When someone maintains calm, controlled eye contact, our brains automatically categorize them as higher status. But here's what separates amateurs from masters. Authority gaze isn't about staring people down or maintaining unblinking eye contact. That approach triggers defensive reactions and makes others uncomfortable. Instead, it's about understanding the subtle rhythms and patterns that signal quiet confidence and natural leadership. The foundation of authority gaze begins with something called the anchor gaze fixation. When you enter a room or begin speaking to a group, your first 5 seconds of eye movement set the tone for everything that follows. Rather than nervously darting your eyes around or fixating on one person, you create what's known as a triangle lock, a deliberate sweep that moves from left to right to center, briefly anchoring on each section. This isn't a mechanical scanning motion that makes you look like a security camera. Instead, it's a confident assessment that says you're taking inventory of your audience before deciding how to engage them. The key is the pause, that brief moment of stillness at each anchor point that allows your presence to register before moving on. This pattern unconsciously signals that you're in control of the interaction, deciding where to direct your attention rather than reactively responding to whoever happens to be speaking. Timing becomes crucial here. Move too quickly, and you appear nervous or scattered. Move too slowly, and you seem calculating or predatory. The sweet spot is roughly 1 to 2 seconds per anchor point, creating a rhythm that feels natural while establishing your visual authority over the space. Once you've established this foundation, there's a micro-technique that can transform how others perceive your confidence: the brows-up prime. This split-second eyebrow flash, lasting no more than 200 milliseconds, serves as a form of visual punctuation that acknowledges others without yielding status. It's the difference between a deferential nod and a confident recognition. The eyebrow flash happens so quickly that most people don't consciously notice it, but their brains register it as a sign of social awareness and control. You're not ignoring people, but you're also not seeking their approval. It's a masterful balance that says you see them, you acknowledge their presence, but you remain firmly in command of the interaction. Perhaps the most powerful yet overlooked aspect of authority gaze involves something you do unconsciously thousands of times per day: blinking. Most people blink 15 to 20 times per minute when they're nervous or uncertain. But individuals who project natural authority tend to blink significantly less, often dropping to as few as 8 to 12 blinks per minute during important conversations. This isn't about forcing yourself to stare without blinking, which creates an unsettling, predatory effect. Instead, it's about developing what's called the slow blink signal, a natural reduction in blink rate that occurs when you're genuinely calm and confident. The technique involves coupling your breathing with your blinking rhythm, allowing slower, deeper breaths to naturally extend the time between blinks. When you breathe deeply and slowly, your entire nervous system calms down, and your blink rate automatically decreases. This creates a feedback loop. Slower blinking makes you feel more confident, which makes others perceive you as more authoritative, which reinforces your actual confidence. It's a subtle but powerful way to broadcast composure even in high-pressure situations. But authority gaze extends beyond individual eye contact. In group settings, your ability to direct collective attention becomes a form of silent leadership. When you shift your gaze deliberately from one person to another, you're essentially conducting the conversation's flow. Others unconsciously follow your visual cues, looking where you look, focusing on whom you focus on. This gives you tremendous power to shape group dynamics. By maintaining eye contact with someone while they speak, you validate their contribution and encourage them to continue. By shifting your gaze away, you signal that it's time for someone else to contribute. By returning your gaze to the center of the group, you reclaim control of the conversation's direction. The integration of authority gaze with your posture and spatial positioning creates a compound effect that's far more powerful than any single technique. When your spine is aligned, your space is commanded, and your gaze is controlled, you project an unmistakable aura of quiet authority that others instinctively respect and follow. Take a moment to reflect. Where do your eyes flee first when you feel challenged or uncertain? Is it down to your notes, sideways to avoid confrontation, or up to the ceiling in thought? Identifying these patterns helps you recognize when your gaze is undermining rather than supporting your authority. Mastering authority gaze transforms every interaction, but even the most commanding eyes mean nothing if your hands are sending contradictory signals. The next dimension of silent persuasion lies in movements so subtle yet significant that they can make or break your credibility in the span of a single gesture. Chapter 4: Prime Gestures. Watch someone's hands during their next presentation, and you'll witness either the birth or death of their credibility. While they speak about quarterly projections or strategic initiatives, their fingers are telling a completely different story, one of confidence or chaos, authority or anxiety. Most people's hands betray them before their words even have a chance to persuade. There's something almost hypnotic about how humans fixate on hand movements. Our brains are hardwired to decode finger positions and palm orientations as rapidly as we process facial expressions. This isn't coincidence, it's evolutionary programming. For thousands of years, hands have signaled intent, cooperation or aggression, competence or confusion, leadership or submission. Today, in boardrooms and conference calls, this ancient language still governs how others perceive your authority. But here's the paradox that trips up most professionals. The more you try to gesture expressively, the more amateur you appear. Flailing hands, rapid finger movements, and constant motion don't convey enthusiasm. They broadcast nervousness and uncertainty. True authority lies not in animated gesturing, but in what experts call prime gestures, deliberate, controlled movements that function like visual punctuation marks for your most important ideas. The foundation of prime gestures rests on a principle that contradicts everything you've been taught about dynamic presentation: low variability gesturing. Instead of using your hands to illustrate every point, you deliberately slow down and reduce the frequency of your movements. This creates a stark contrast that makes each gesture exponentially more powerful when it does occur. Think of it like this: if you're constantly moving your hands, each gesture becomes background noise. But when you maintain stillness and then introduce a single purposeful movement, that gesture commands absolute attention. The key is developing what's known as the 3-second rule, allowing at least 3 seconds of stillness between significant hand movements. This pacing transforms your gestures from nervous fidgeting into authoritative emphasis. The challenge lies in eliminating what gesture experts call helicopter hands, those rapid, circular motions that make you look like you're trying to take flight. These movements drain your authority because they suggest you're struggling to find the right words or fighting to maintain control. Instead, when you do gesture, each movement should be deliberate, controlled, and brief. Once you've mastered this foundation of controlled movement, certain hand shapes emerge as particularly powerful authority signals. The first is something called the steeple effect, bringing your fingertips together to form a church-like spire with your hands. This gesture has been unconsciously associated with thoughtfulness and controlled confidence for centuries, appearing in everything from religious iconography to judicial settings. The steeple works because it suggests you're carefully considering your words while maintaining complete composure. It's a gesture that says you have something valuable to contribute, but you're taking the time to formulate it precisely. However, there's a fine line between confident steepling and arrogant posturing. Overuse this gesture or hold it too long, and you risk appearing condescending or overly calculated. Another prime gesture involves creating what's known as power triangle framing, using your hands to form triangular shapes that visually bracket your most important points. When you bring your hands together to form a triangle, either with fingertips touching or palms facing each other, you're creating a visual container for your ideas. This framing technique unconsciously signals that what you're saying is important enough to be packaged and delivered with precision. The timing of triangle framing becomes crucial. You don't want to frame every statement, that would dilute its impact. Instead, reserve this gesture for your key messages, the moments when you need the room to pay closest attention. Pair the triangle formation with a slight pause before speaking, and you've created a powerful 1-2 combination that demands focus. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of prime gestures involves something called the palm exposure ratio, the strategic revelation or concealment of your palms to calibrate perceptions of dominance and warmth. When your palms face downward or remain hidden, you project authority and control. When your palms are visible and oriented vertically or slightly upward, you invite collaboration and signal openness. This isn't about choosing one orientation over another. It's about consciously adjusting your palm exposure to match your communication goals. During moments when you need to assert authority or deliver difficult news, palms down positioning reinforces your message. When you're building consensus or encouraging input, visible palms create psychological safety and invite participation. The sophistication lies in transitioning between these positions fluidly, reading the room's energy, and adjusting your palm exposure accordingly. It's like having a dimmer switch for your authority. You can dial up dominance when needed or soften your approach to build rapport. Mastering prime gestures requires what's called gesture stacking, linking your hand movements to the rhythm and emphasis of your speech. Each gesture should coincide with a key word or phrase, creating a synchronized impact that reinforces your message both visually and auditorily. This synchronization happens naturally when you slow down and become more intentional about both your words and movements. Practice this integration by rehearsing important presentations in front of a mirror with the sound muted. Watch only your gestures and notice which movements feel natural and authoritative versus which ones appear forced or distracting. This visual feedback helps you identify and eliminate gesture patterns that undermine rather than support your message. Take a moment to reflect on your own gesture habits. Which hand movements leak your nervousness or uncertainty? Do you fidget with pens, touch your face, or make repetitive motions when you're under pressure? Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward replacing them with prime gestures that reinforce your authority. When you combine controlled gestures with commanding posture, strategic spatial positioning, and authority gaze, you create a compound effect that's undeniably powerful. But even perfect gestures can be undermined by something far more subtle. Microsignals that operate below the threshold of conscious awareness, yet wield enormous influence over how others perceive and respond to your presence. Chapter 5: Microsignals. In the split second between someone asking you a question and your response, an invisible battle for conversational control takes place. Most people rush to fill that silence, afraid that any pause signals uncertainty or weakness. But what if that fraction of a second could actually hand you the steering wheel of every interaction? What if the smallest delays, the briefest movements, and the most subtle facial shifts could tilt power dynamics entirely in your favor? Welcome to the hidden world of microsignals. Communications so brief they barely register in conscious awareness, yet so powerful they can determine who leads and who follows in any conversation. While others focus on grand gestures and dramatic presentations, true influence masters understand that authority often lives in the spaces between words, in the milliseconds between movements, in the tiny pauses that most people never even notice. The human brain operates on a fascinating principle. It pays disproportionate attention to what changes suddenly or stops unexpectedly. This is called the orienting reflex, an ancient survival mechanism that helped our ancestors detect threats and opportunities in their environment. Today, this same reflex governs how we perceive status and authority in social interactions. The person who controls the microrhythms of conversation, who knows when to pause, when to move, when to be still, unconsciously signals that they're in command. But here's the counterintuitive truth that separates amateurs from masters. In the realm of microsignals, less is exponentially more. While nervous speakers fill every silence and anxious presenters gesture constantly, Authority figures understand the power of strategic restraint. They know that a single well-timed microsignal can carry more weight than minutes of animated expression. The foundation of microsignal mastery begins with something called the micro-moment imbalance, a deliberate delay in your response that lasts roughly 600 milliseconds, about the time it takes to silently count 1. When someone asks you a question or makes a statement that demands your reaction, instead of immediately responding, you create this tiny pause. It's barely noticeable to the conscious mind, but it sends a powerful subconscious message. You're not reactive, you're responsive. You consider before you speak. You control the tempo of the interaction. This isn't about creating awkward silences or appearing slow to respond. The pause is so brief that most people don't consciously register it, but their brains interpret it as a sign of thoughtfulness and control. You're signaling that you have the luxury of considering your words rather than feeling pressured to respond instantly. This micro moment of ownership transforms you from someone who reacts to conversations into someone who directs them. Training this delay requires practice because our natural instinct is to fill silence immediately. Start by consciously implementing a silent count of 1 before responding to any question or comment. Initially, this will feel unnaturally long, but with repetition, it becomes an automatic response that enhances your perceived authority without any conscious effort. The key is establishing guardrails to prevent this pause from becoming awkward dead air. The micro moment should feel like thoughtful consideration, not confusion or hesitation. Maintain steady eye contact during the pause, keep your posture aligned, and ensure your facial expression remains calm and engaged. These supporting signals tell others that you're processing, not struggling. Another powerful microsignal involves something as simple as an eyebrow flash, a brief, almost imperceptible raising of the eyebrows that lasts no more than 200 milliseconds. This tiny movement serves as a form of non-verbal punctuation that acknowledges others without yielding status. It's the difference between a deferential nod and a confident recognition. The eyebrow flash happens so quickly that it operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, but it's registered by the primitive parts of the brain that process social hierarchy. When you combine this micro-movement with your micro-moment pause, you create a sophisticated sequence. You acknowledge the speaker with the eyebrow flash, pause to consider their words, then respond with authority. This entire sequence takes less than 2 seconds, but fundamentally shifts the power dynamic in your favor. Perhaps the most advanced microsignal technique involves mastering what's called static dynamic contrast, the strategic alternation between complete stillness and sudden, purposeful movement. Most people exist in a constant state of low-level motion, shifting weight, adjusting posture, making small gestures. This background movement dilutes the impact of any significant gesture they might make. Authority figures understand the power of command stillness, periods of complete physical calm that make any subsequent movement exponentially more noticeable. When you remain perfectly still while speaking or listening, you create what's known as the human cursor effect. You become the focal point of attention simply through the absence of movement. Then, when you do move, a single gesture, a slight lean forward, a deliberate shift in posture, that movement commands absolute attention because it breaks the established pattern of stillness. The sequencing of these static dynamic contrasts allows you to create a hierarchy of importance for your ideas. Your most critical points get punctuated with movement, while supporting details are delivered in stillness. This creates a visual rhythm that helps your audience unconsciously organize and prioritize the information you're sharing. The true mastery of microsignals comes from stacking these techniques, combining the micro-moment pause with the eyebrow flash, integrating static dynamic contrast with strategic stillness. When someone makes an important point, you might respond with an eyebrow flash of acknowledgement, followed by a micro-moment pause, then a single, purposeful gesture that signals you're ready to respond. This entire sequence takes less than 3 seconds, but establishes you as the conversational leader. Reflect on your own micro-moment habits. Where do your tiny signals leak nervousness or uncertainty? Do you rush to fill silences, constantly fidget, or avoid those brief pauses that could enhance your authority? Identifying these patterns helps you replace reactive microsignals with intentional ones that support your leadership presence. Mastering microsignals creates a foundation of subtle authority that amplifies every other aspect of your nonverbal communication. But even the most perfectly timed pauses and precisely controlled movements can be undermined if you're not reading the room correctly. The next dimension of silent persuasion involves something far more complex: the delicate art of reflecting others while maintaining your own position of strength. Chapter 6: Strategic Mirroring. There's a moment in every negotiation when you realize someone is copying your movements. Leaning back when you lean back, crossing their arms when you cross yours, matching your vocal pace and energy. Your first instinct might be to feel flattered or suspicious, but what you're witnessing is one of the most sophisticated influence techniques in human interaction. The question isn't whether mirroring is happening, it's who's controlling the rhythm. Most people think mirroring is about becoming a human photocopier, instantly reflecting whatever the other person does. This crude approach backfires spectacularly, making you appear desperate for approval, or worse, mockingly obvious. True strategic mirroring operates on a completely different level. It's about creating connection while maintaining control, building rapport while preserving your position as the interaction's leader. The power of mirroring lies deep in our neurological wiring. Mirror neurons fire both when we perform an action and when we observe others performing the same action. This creates an unconscious sense of connection and similarity that bypasses rational thought. When someone mirrors us subtly and skillfully, we experience them as more likable, more trustworthy, and more aligned with our thinking, even though we can't articulate why. But here's the crucial distinction that separates influence masters from amateurs. The person who initiates the mirroring pattern, who sets the tempo and controls the timing, is unconsciously perceived as the leader. It's not enough to simply copy what others do. You must understand how to mirror strategically while maintaining your authority throughout the process. The foundation of strategic mirroring rests on something called phase lag mirroring, deliberately delaying your mimicry by approximately 2 seconds. When your conversation partner leans forward, you don't immediately mirror their movement. Instead, you wait, continue your current posture for a moment, then smoothly transition to match their position. This delay serves multiple purposes. It prevents your mirroring from appearing obvious. It demonstrates that you're responding thoughtfully rather than reactively, and it establishes you as the one who chooses when and how to create connection. This 2-second delay isn't arbitrary. It's based on the optimal window for unconscious processing. Any shorter, and your mirroring appears reactive or desperate. Any longer, and the connection between their movement and yours becomes too distant to register subconsciously. The sweet spot creates the impression that you're naturally aligned with their thinking, not mechanically copying their behavior. The sophistication comes in what happens after you've matched their position. Once you've mirrored their posture or gesture, you can begin to lead, making subtle adjustments that invite them to follow your movements instead. This creates a powerful psychological dynamic where they begin unconsciously following your lead while feeling like you're perfectly in sync with their preferences. One of the most common mirroring mistakes involves something as simple as nodding. When someone is speaking passionately about their ideas, the natural impulse is to nod enthusiastically to show engagement and agreement. But there's a critical threshold called the synchronous nod limit that you must never exceed. 3 nods maximum per speaking turn. Excessive nodding transforms you from an engaged listener into a subordinate seeking approval. It signals that you're hanging on their every word, desperate for their validation. Instead, strategic nodding involves measured, deliberate head movements that acknowledge their points without surrendering your status. 3 nods communicate, "I hear you, I understand you, and I'm evaluating what you're saying," a far more powerful position than enthusiastic agreement. When you've exceeded the 3-nod limit, you need to reset by introducing a period of stillness, perhaps combined with a thoughtful expression that suggests you're processing their information. This pause allows you to recalibrate the dynamic and return to a position of engaged authority rather than eager followership. Another sophisticated aspect of strategic mirroring involves palm exposure calibration, matching the openness or closedness of someone's hand positions while maintaining your own authority signals. When your conversation partner displays open palms, indicating warmth and collaboration, you can mirror this openness to build rapport. However, you must be careful not to mirror submissive palm positions that would undermine your status. The key is understanding how to mirror the emotional tone of their palm exposure while maintaining your own power positioning. If they're displaying open, collaborative palms, you can respond with visible palms that are oriented more vertically or slightly downward, mirroring their warmth while preserving your authority. This creates connection without surrendering control. Sometimes you can use what's called a split-second palm flip to steer conversations in your preferred direction. By briefly mirroring their palm position, then smoothly transitioning to a more authoritative hand position, you can guide the emotional tone of the interaction. They feel heard and understood because you initially matched their energy, but you've subtly shifted the dynamic toward your preferred framework. The mastery of strategic mirroring lies in developing what's called the scan-match-lead loop, a continuous cycle of observing their nonverbal cues, selectively mirroring elements that build rapport, then introducing subtle leadership signals that invite them to follow your direction. This isn't a mechanical process, but a fluid dance where you're constantly reading the interaction and adjusting your approach. The scanning phase involves monitoring their posture, gestures, vocal pace, and energy level. The matching phase selects specific elements to mirror, usually those that signal openness, engagement, or positive emotion. The leading phase introduces your own subtle adjustments that guide the interaction toward your objectives while maintaining the sense of connection you've created. Reflect on your own mirroring patterns. When do you follow too quickly, appearing reactive rather than responsive? Do you overnod when you're nervous or trying to build rapport? Are there situations where you mirror submissive behaviors that undermine your authority? Recognizing these tendencies helps you develop more strategic approaches to building connection while maintaining leadership. Strategic mirroring, when combined with your mastery of posture, spatial command, authority gaze, prime gestures, and microsignals, creates a compound effect that's remarkably powerful. But even perfect mirroring can be rendered ineffective if you can't control the underlying rhythm that governs all human interaction, a deeper current that flows beneath every conversation and determines who truly holds influence. Chapter 7. Tempo Control. Have you ever noticed how some people can walk into a chaotic meeting and somehow slow everything down just by their presence? While others are speaking rapidly, gesturing frantically, and radiating nervous energy, these individuals seem to operate on a different frequency entirely, one that gradually pulls everyone else into their rhythm. They're not louder or more animated, they're something far more powerful. They're the metronome that sets the beat for every interaction. This isn't about speaking slowly or moving like you're underwater. Tempo control is the sophisticated art of regulating the underlying rhythms that govern human interaction: breath, movement, vocal pace, and the spaces between words. When you master these rhythms, you become the conductor of every conversation, subtly guiding others toward the emotional state and energy level that serves your objectives. Most people are unconscious slaves to whatever tempo surrounds them. In high-stress meetings, they automatically speed up, matching the frantic energy of the room. During casual conversations, they drift into whatever pace the other person sets. They're reactive rather than directive, followers rather than leaders of the interaction's fundamental rhythm. But here's what separates influence masters from everyone else. They understand that tempo isn't just about speed. It's about the physiological synchronization that occurs when humans interact. When you control your own rhythms deliberately and strategically, others unconsciously begin to match your patterns. Their breathing slows to match yours. Their movements become more measured. Their speech patterns align with your cadence. You become the dominant biological signal in the room. The foundation of tempo control begins with something most people never consciously consider: their breathing pattern. Every emotion, every stress level, every state of confidence or anxiety is reflected in how you breathe. Nervous speakers take shallow, rapid breaths that create a cascade of physiological reactions: increased heart rate, tense muscles, and a voice that sounds strained or uncertain. Breath rate entrainment works on a fascinating principle. When you deliberately slow and deepen your breathing, others in your vicinity unconsciously begin to synchronize with your respiratory rhythm. This isn't mystical, it's measurable physiology. Humans are hardwired to mirror the breathing patterns of those around them, especially those who appear calm and confident. The technique involves establishing what's called a 4-6-4 breathing cycle. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 6 counts, exhale for 4 counts. This pattern naturally slows your heart rate, relaxes your nervous system, and creates a sense of calm authority that others find compelling. When you breathe this way consistently during important conversations, you're essentially setting the room's emotional thermostat, nudging everyone toward a calmer, more receptive state. But timing becomes crucial here. You can't suddenly shift into deep breathing in the middle of a heated discussion without appearing obvious or manipulative. Instead, you implement what's called a silent sigh reset, a single, deeper breath that you take just before making an important point. This momentary shift in your breathing pattern creates a micropause that draws attention while simultaneously calming your own physiology. The sophistication of tempo control extends beyond breathing into the rhythm of your physical movements. Most people exist in a constant state of low-level motion, shifting weight, adjusting posture, making small gestures. This background movement creates visual noise that dilutes the impact of any significant gesture they might make. Strategic tempo control involves mastering the rhythm of stillness, deliberately alternating between complete physical calm and purposeful movement. When you remain perfectly still while speaking, you create what's known as motion brackets around your ideas. The stillness focuses attention on your words, while any subsequent movement punctuates and emphasizes your key points. This isn't about becoming statue-like or robotic. Instead, it's about using movement as punctuation rather than constant background noise. A slight lean forward to emphasize a critical point becomes exponentially more powerful when it breaks a pattern of stillness. A gesture that accompanies your most important message commands absolute attention because it contrasts with the measured calm you've established. Even something as simple as shifting your position in your chair can become a tempo control tool. When you make a deliberate, measured adjustment to your posture, perhaps leaning back to signal confidence or shifting forward to indicate engagement, you're using physical rhythm to guide the conversation's emotional flow. Perhaps the most advanced aspect of tempo control involves vocal gesture synchrony, precisely aligning your hand movements with specific words to create maximum impact. Most people gesture randomly, their hands moving independently of their speech patterns. This creates a disconnect between their verbal and visual messages that weakens both. Strategic synchrony involves what's called word-on-impact timing, ensuring that your gesture peaks exactly when you say your most important word. When your hand movement and your vocal emphasis hit simultaneously, the combined impact is far greater than either element alone. This synchronization requires practice, but it creates a compelling sense of authority and intentionality. The key is avoiding what tempo experts call jazz hands overload, the tendency to gesture constantly or to make every movement dramatic. Effective vocal gesture synchrony is subtle and selective, reserved for your most critical messages. When every gesture is synchronized and purposeful, each one carries exponentially more weight. Developing tempo control requires what's called pre-meeting calibration, taking a few minutes before important interactions to establish your optimal rhythm. This might involve practicing your 4-6-4 breathing pattern, rehearsing key gestures with their corresponding words, or simply taking a moment to slow down your internal pace before entering the room. Reflect on your own tempo patterns. Where do you rush when you're nervous or excited? Do you speed up your speech when you're passionate about a topic? Do your gestures become more frantic when you're trying to persuade someone? Identifying these patterns helps you develop conscious control over the rhythms that either support or undermine your authority. Mastering tempo control creates a foundation of calm authority that amplifies every other aspect of your nonverbal communication. But even perfect rhythm means nothing if you can't navigate the delicate boundaries of human connection, boundaries that, when crossed skillfully, can cement your influence in ways that words alone never could. Chapter 8. Power Touch. There's a moment in every important handshake when you realize something profound is happening beyond the simple greeting. A brief contact that lasts perhaps half a second longer than expected. A subtle pressure that conveys confidence without aggression. A positioning that somehow makes you feel both acknowledged and guided. What you're experiencing isn't accidental. It's one of the most delicate yet powerful tools in the silent persuasion arsenal. Most people treat physical contact in professional settings like a minefield, either avoiding it entirely or using it clumsily without understanding its profound psychological impact. But those who master what's known as power touch understand that minimal, strategically applied contact can cement relationships, establish hierarchy, and create trust in ways that hours of conversation cannot achieve. The reluctance around professional touch is understandable. We live in an era of heightened awareness about boundaries and consent, and rightfully so. But this has created an overcorrection where many professionals miss opportunities to build genuine human connection through appropriate, respectful contact. The key lies not in avoiding touch entirely, but in understanding how to use it with surgical precision and impeccable timing. The science behind strategic touch is both fascinating and undeniable. When skin makes contact with skin, even briefly, it triggers the release of oxytocin, often called the trust hormone. This neurochemical response happens automatically below the threshold of conscious awareness, creating an instant sense of connection and rapport that bypasses rational thought. It's why a firm handshake feels more trustworthy than a weak one, why a brief touch on the shoulder can seal a deal, and why certain people seem to build relationships effortlessly. But here's the crucial distinction that separates power touch from inappropriate contact. It's not about the amount of touch, but the precision, timing, and context. Power touch operates on what's called the temporal haptics principle. Contact that lasts less than 1 second occurs in socially appropriate contexts and serves a clear communicative purpose rather than personal gratification. The foundation of power touch rests on understanding the touch hierarchy model, a ranking system that maps different contact points according to their social acceptability and authority impact. At the top of this hierarchy sits the upper arm touch, particularly the area between the shoulder and elbow. This zone strikes the perfect balance between being socially safe and psychologically powerful. Upper arm contact works because it's far enough from intimate zones to remain professional, yet close enough to the core of the body to register as significant contact. When you briefly touch someone's upper arm while making an important point or expressing appreciation, you're accessing one of the most powerful influence tools available while staying well within professional boundaries. Moving down the hierarchy, shoulder contact carries slightly less authority but remains highly effective, particularly in congratulatory or supportive contexts. The elbow represents the safest but least impactful option, appropriate for the most conservative environments but with diminished influence potential. The sophistication of power touch lies in something called the handshake extender, the strategic stacking of multiple brief contacts during a single interaction. This might involve a firm handshake followed by a brief upper arm touch while expressing appreciation, or a shoulder contact while guiding someone toward a seat. These stacked touches create compound effects that dramatically amplify the trust and rapport-building potential of each individual contact. Timing becomes absolutely critical in power touch application. The sub-second rule isn't arbitrary. It's based on the optimal window for triggering oxytocin release without crossing into intrusive territory. Contact that's too brief fails to register meaningfully, while contact that's too long triggers discomfort and defensive reactions. The sweet spot creates maximum neurochemical impact while maintaining complete social appropriateness. The palm orientation during touch adds another layer of sophisticated communication. When you make contact with your palm facing downward, you're sending a subtle directive signal. You're guiding, leading, or emphasizing authority. When your palm faces vertically or slightly upward during contact, you're communicating collaboration and equality. This palm positioning works in conjunction with the touch itself to fine-tune the exact message you're conveying. A palm-down directive touch might accompany phrases like, "I need you to handle this," or "This is crucial for our success." The combination of words, touch, and palm orientation creates a powerful authority signal that's both respectful and commanding. Conversely, a palm vertical ally touch works perfectly with collaborative language like, "Let's tackle this together," or "I appreciate your partnership on this." The mastery of power touch requires developing what's called consent radar, the ability to read micro-expressions and body language cues that indicate whether touch will be welcomed or rejected. Before any contact, you must scan for openness signals, relaxed posture, steady eye contact, and engaged facial expressions. Warning signs include tension, backward lean, crossed arms, or averted gaze. Cultural and gender considerations add additional layers of complexity to power touch application. What's appropriate varies significantly across different cultural contexts and between different gender combinations. The key is developing sensitivity to these variations while maintaining the core principles of brief, purposeful, respectful contact. Power touch also requires understanding when it's completely off limits. High-stress situations, formal presentations, disciplinary conversations, and any context where emotions are running high generally call for hands-off approaches. The goal is building connection and authority, not creating discomfort or misunderstanding. Reflect on your own relationship with professional touch. Do you avoid it entirely out of caution, or do you use it without strategic consideration? Are there situations where appropriate touch could enhance your influence and relationship building? Understanding your current patterns helps you develop more intentional approaches to this powerful tool. When power touch is integrated with your mastery of posture, spatial command, authority gaze, prime gestures, microsignals, strategic mirroring, and tempo control, it creates a comprehensive silent persuasion system that's remarkably effective. But even the most perfectly executed touch means nothing if you can't end interactions on your terms, if you can't control the final moments that determine how others remember you and your influence. Chapter 9. Exit Control. The last 10 seconds of any interaction carry more weight than the previous 10 minutes. While others fumble through awkward goodbyes or let conversations drift into uncomfortable silence, you're about to master the art of ending every encounter on your terms, leaving behind a final impression so commanding that people will remember your authority long after your words have faded. Most people think about beginnings, how to make a strong first impression, how to open presentations powerfully, how to establish credibility from the start. But influence masters understand a profound truth about human psychology. We remember endings with disproportionate clarity and emotional weight. The way you conclude an interaction doesn't just close the conversation, it frames how everything that preceded it will be remembered and interpreted. This isn't about dramatic exits or theatrical gestures. Exit control is the sophisticated orchestration of subtle physical cues that signal closure, establish finality, and position you as the one who determines when and how interactions conclude. When you master this final dimension of silent persuasion, you transform from someone who participates in conversations into someone who directs their entire arc from beginning to end. The psychology behind exit control taps into something called recency bias, the human tendency to give disproportionate weight to the most recent information or experience. In social interactions, this means the last few moments of contact often override everything that came before in terms of emotional impact and memory formation. A weak, uncertain ending can undermine an otherwise powerful interaction, while a confident, controlled conclusion can elevate even mediocre encounters into memorable experiences. There's also a deeper psychological dynamic at play: closure anxiety. Most people feel uncomfortable with ambiguous endings and experience relief when interactions conclude clearly and definitively. The person who provides that closure, who signals when the interaction is complete and guides others toward the exit, automatically assumes a position of social leadership that extends far beyond the immediate conversation. The foundation of exit control begins with something called exit shift forecasting, a subtle transfer of your body weight toward the exit point that occurs 5 to 10 seconds before you actually begin your verbal wrap-up. This micro-movement serves as an unconscious signal that the interaction is approaching its natural conclusion, preparing others psychologically for the transition while positioning you as the one controlling the timing. The weight shift is almost imperceptible. A slight lean, a minor adjustment in your stance, a barely noticeable pivot that orients your body toward the door or your next destination. But this tiny movement triggers a cascade of unconscious responses in others. They begin to mentally prepare for closure, organize their final thoughts, and orient themselves toward conclusion. You've essentially started the ending process before anyone consciously realizes the conversation is winding down. The sophistication lies in pairing this physical forecasting with your verbal wrap-up. As you shift your weight, you might say something like, "This has been incredibly valuable," or "I think we've covered the key points." The combination of physical and verbal signals creates a powerful 1-2 punch that makes your control over the interaction's conclusion feel natural and inevitable rather than abrupt or manipulative. But exit control extends beyond weight shifts into more deliberate directional cues. The foot pivot directive involves angling your lead foot toward your intended exit or next destination, creating a subtle but unmistakable signal about the interaction's trajectory. This isn't a dramatic turn away from the other person. It's a measured adjustment that suggests forward momentum while maintaining engagement. In group settings, this foot positioning becomes even more powerful. When you pivot toward the door or gesture toward the next area of the conference, others unconsciously follow your directional cues. You're essentially steering the crowd through nonverbal leadership, guiding group movement without having to explicitly direct people where to go. Sometimes, other participants will attempt to extend the conversation beyond your intended conclusion. When someone blocks your pivot by continuing to talk or asking additional questions, you can reset by returning to neutral positioning, acknowledging their input briefly, then reestablishing your directional cues more definitively. This shows respect for their contribution while maintaining your control over the interaction's timeline. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of exit control involves what's called object barrier removal, the strategic handling of physical items to underscore finality and reclaim agenda control. When you close your laptop with a definitive click, pocket your phone with purposeful movement, or gather your materials in a measured way, you're creating what researchers call nonverbal bookends that frame the interaction as complete. The laptop lid becomes particularly powerful in professional settings. When you close it decisively, not slamming it, but with clear intentionality, you're sending an unmistakable signal that the business portion of the interaction has concluded. It's a period, not a comma, in the conversation's punctuation. This action often triggers others to begin their own wrap-up behaviors, creating a cascade of closure signals that reinforces your control over the timing. The phone-in-pocket technique works brilliantly for hallway conversations or informal interactions. When you deliberately put away your device while maintaining eye contact, you're signaling that your attention is shifting from this conversation to your next priority. It's a respectful but definitive way to create closure without appearing rude or dismissive. The mastery of exit control culminates in what's called the handshake plus glance finale, a sophisticated combination that seals your authority while leaving a lasting positive impression. As you extend your hand for the concluding handshake, you briefly glance toward your next destination or objective, then return your full attention to the person you're leaving. This sequence communicates that you have important things to attend to while ensuring the other person feels properly acknowledged and respected. This isn't about appearing rushed or dismissive. The glance is brief and purposeful, suggesting that you're a person with priorities and responsibilities, while the return of your attention to the handshake ensures the other person feels valued and properly concluded with. It's a delicate balance that projects both importance and respect. Take a moment to reflect on your current goodbye patterns. Do you let conversations drift into uncomfortable silence? Do you struggle with knowing when and how to end interactions? Do others often control the timing of your departures? Understanding these patterns helps you develop more intentional approaches to conclusion and closure. Now, here's the profound realization that ties everything together. Mastering exit control isn't just about ending individual conversations. It's about understanding that you have the power to shape every aspect of human interaction through conscious, strategic, nonverbal communication. Throughout this journey, you've learned to command attention through core posture, claim territory through spatial awareness, direct focus through authority gaze, emphasize points through prime gestures, influence timing through microsignals, build rapport through strategic mirroring, set emotional tone through tempo control, create connection through power touch, and control conclusions through exit mastery. But the real transformation isn't in any single technique. It's in the recognition that every moment of human interaction is an opportunity to exercise influence, build authority, and create the outcomes you desire. You now possess a complete system of silent persuasion that operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, yet wields enormous power over how others perceive, respond to, and remember you. The person you were when you started reading this book. Someone who may have felt at the mercy of social dynamics, uncertain about their presence, or frustrated by their inability to command the respect they deserved. That person no longer exists. You've been replaced by someone who understands that true authority isn't granted by titles or positions, but claimed through the mastery of the silent language that governs all human interaction. Your posture now broadcasts confidence before you speak. Your spatial positioning establishes leadership before you act. Your gaze commands attention before you gesture. Your hands emphasize authority before you touch. Your micro-moments control timing before you mirror. Your mirroring builds rapport before you set tempo. Your tempo creates influence before you make contact. Your touch cements connection before you exit, and your exits seal authority that extends far beyond any single interaction. This is your new reality. You are no longer subject to the random forces of social dynamics. You are their master. Every room you enter, every conversation you join, every interaction you have is now an opportunity to exercise this mastery and create the influence, respect, and authority you've always deserved. The silent language of power is now yours to speak fluently. Use it wisely, use it ethically, and watch as the world begins to respond to the authority you've always possessed but never knew how to express. But here's what most people discover after mastering nonverbal authority. Their newfound presence creates opportunities for high-stakes conversations they were never prepared to navigate. You can command a room with perfect posture and authority gaze, yet still lose control the moment someone asks a challenging question or steers the dialogue in an unexpected direction. What happens when your silent persuasion opens doors to conversations that determine your career, relationships, and future? But you lack the frameworks to guide those interactions toward your desired outcomes. The gap between commanding presence and conversational mastery can cost you everything you've worked to build. There's a systematic approach to ensuring that every word you speak matches the authority your body language now projects, and it's revealed in the audiobook Conversation Control, Frameworks to Guide Any Interaction. Tap the center of the video now to continue your transformation journey.